get it rolling. And we'll also, I'm just going to ask for a little bit of grace. We're doing the best we can, and I'm trying to sort out how the technology will work. Kenya Baker, who's on the screen, from Dayton, will be on the screen. We'll do the best we can with the audio. If you have questions, not sure if it will pick up for her to listen to, so I'll do the best I can to make sure that I'm fielding questions from you if it's to Kenya so she can hear it. And also technology is technology, so there's any sort of things that can happen. One thing I'll also point out is that there is recording that's happening in this room for others. If there's some things that are coming up in conversation, because I want this to be a frank conversation. So if you're like, you know what, I'm running for office, and if I say this thing, there goes whatever thing, we'll make sure that that gets eliminated. Just say, I want this on the record, right? So it would be a cue to make sure that that doesn't go anywhere but in this room. So my name is Darnell Adams. I'm the facilitator today for this conversation about Black food sovereignty. So just make sure everybody knows the conversation, if this is not where you're meant to be. But otherwise, I'm really glad you're here. I also want to just make sure that while we're having this conversation, to know that we're centering the experiences, the voices of Black people in this room today, which means that we are glad to have everybody here, right? Like that is absolutely what we want. I think this conversation is really important for everyone to hear. But if you're earlier in your journey in terms of understanding racial equity, et cetera, this may not be the place for the kind of questions, but early on questions, right? And I'm happy to have that conversation later in another space with you. But today we're really wanting to go deep into some things that people are living and breathing, experiencing every day. So we want to make sure there's space for that. But without further ado, I just want to introduce, and actually I want to have them introduce themselves because that would be better. First, we're going to actually start with Dr. Jazz, and then it will be Amaha Selassie, and then Kenya Baker, who are just going to say a little bit about their work and how they've come to kind of arrive sitting here talking about this subject.
All right, peace, y'all. Good volume for y'all. Yeah. All right, I'm Dr. Jazz. I'm excited to be here, seeing some new faces, some familiar faces. I'm the new co-executive director of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. I'm excited to be in this space, holding leadership. I'm sharing that with Cicely Garrett, our other co-executive director. We got some staff in the room too. And I'm sitting next to one of our members here, so it feels like I'm here with family. Yes. So I'd like to say a little bit about the Alliance after I just tell you a little bit more about me. So I'm born and bred in New Orleans. That's where I'm based as well. And I left New Orleans maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, seeking to plan a community. So I went to Alabama to get a master's in community planning. And then I realized it's not about the plan, it's all about the policy. So then I got my PhD at Tuskegee in integrative public policy and development. And there I studied specifically how local food systems create community and economic development. So now to be working with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, where we're a coalition of other Black-led organizations where we focus on food sovereignty, self-determining food economies, and land justice. So it feels like my life's work, my research, and my current work all is like happening now as one. So it feels really good to be in this place. And I just feel like the Alliance is a great home where I'm have landed politically. We've been around for about 7 years now, where we've continued to develop Black leadership, supporting Black communities, and organizing as well to build institutions. So some of those institutions that we're building is the Center for Agroecology at the Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, where we will be sharing resources with HBCU 1890 land grant students to figure out how to do regenerative agriculture and not so much be sucked into the USDA, Monsanto, Frito-Lay, all the other poachers that give internships right out of school. So hoping that this can be an institution that outlives us all. But that's just a little bit about me. I don't know about the background though.
No, wait, so she's actually on mute right now.
No, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm on mute.
Oh, yeah, no.
Come on, it's been a long, you know it's been long.
It's all right.
Oh, man. All right, and Kenya did it herself, because apparently I can't help myself right now. Thank you for crowdsourcing.
Now you can unmute yourself.
That's because
Oh, you can unmute.
if you mute somebody.
Oh, I asked for grace. I did ask for grace. I appreciate you all, thank you. All right, we're good.
Filling up. Love it when it moves.
Hey, I love hearing how you're having people like this. That's a huge pleasure. My name is Maha Slafi with Gem City Co-op and also with Co-op Baby, which is a co-op incubator that's striving to see like how we can build a more just solidarity economy. I think like how I got into this work was just knowing that there was more possibilities and that we were stronger together than apart, right? And so how start building the deeper relationships, and then in that process, like how does that ground ourselves inside of land? So we have a couple different co-ops. We have the Gem City Market, then we also have the Dula Co-op. We have Makerspace. Right now, we're looking at there's Edgemont, which is like a gardening space inside of an area that's been underdeveloped, and so we're figuring out how to build a partnership with them around composting or something like that. So like how we continue to build co-ops around land and land development and keeping resources and power.
And Kenya, can you speak a little bit about the work you're doing?
Baker, and I came to this work through Gem City Market. I was the outreach director, started off as a volunteer and found myself deeply engrossed in the work after being a teacher for 17 years in a classroom and really wanting to delve into community work and community service that supported the lives of the children that I had been servicing for 17 years around food justice and food sovereignty. I noticed a lot of children were surviving off of diets of flaming hots and ramen noodles. So when I heard about the work being done by Maha Slafi, my friend, and several others in the community, I just jumped right in and found ways of supporting that work. And then in the process of developing the grocery store, which we just celebrated our first year anniversary. In the process of developing that wonderful edifice, Gem City Market, I started noticing a problem that we could possibly be perpetuating by putting a grocery store in a disenfranchised neighborhood, and that's gentrification. So now the core of my work is Unified Power, where I'm the executive director, and it is a community land trust and real estate investment cooperative, and it's designed to stop the gentrification in this urban core that we call West Dayton, and I affectionately call Wakanda.
Kenya, we appreciate you always. Thank you. So, was everyone able to hear Kenya well, or do I need to turn anything up in the back? Was it? It was good, great, fantastic. All right, this is how the plan is working. It's working, this is exciting. All right, so I'm going to start with some questions, and please do know, we'll start asking questions. We'll see how it works in terms of whether or not we can take some questions as we're continuing the conversation. But there will definitely be time for a Q&A at the end as well. We want to make sure that there is some conversation here, because I know there's a lot of knowledge in the room. So the first question for the panelists is, how can food co-ops be a tool for not just providing healthy food for communities, but also to further the movement for racial and economic justice?
So I was thinking just to continue to keep referencing Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhardt's Collective Courage book. Y'all haven't read it, please do. It definitely gives us more insight about co-ops being more about power and like shifting that power. So there's buying power, there's political power, and there's people power. And I just feel that it's not just a grocery store. It's a way to practice some democratic governance, creating some shared principles and values. So not being so capitalistic in this capitalistic world. And then wealth power and authority. It's typically in like where we live, it's concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy people. But when very few. But when you have a cooperative, you can create that balance and share that wealth and share that power. So not just in like an economic sense, but also just ensuring that people feel like they belong, like having member owners and control of like where they eat and shop and spend their money. So thinking about how co-ops are a pillar of the community, they are a way to continue to move vehicles through. In the Black community, period, co-ops were created out of necessity. It's not just like a fad. It's not new. This is something that we've been doing. It's in our blood. So one of those fights, it's a fight for a broader struggle. And I quoted Fannie Lou from Dr. Monica White's Freedom Farmer book about food being a political weapon. So when we use it in our own, we can control our food systems and the means of production. Then that means we can build towards freedom. So I definitely feel that co-ops are more than just stores or more than just places or buildings. Yeah, we can build stronger together.
Dr. Jazz.
Kenya, do you want me to ask the question again? Do you recall? I know you don't have it in front of you, all the questions. You're on mute. You're currently on mute, Kenya.
Oh, I said yes. After that powerhouse answer, I definitely need a question.
You got it. So the question is, how can food co-ops be a tool for not just providing healthy food for communities, but also further the movement for racial and economic justice?
Okay, great. Yes, I think one of the core issues in our communities in the urban core, because of all of the structural violence from redlining to disenfranchisement, is self-awareness. I think that the grocery store gives people an opportunity to have that third space where they can commune together and talk about issues that they may not be aware of themselves, and not just top of mind. We are so busy caught in the rat race of this capitalistic system that we don't have that opportunity to really commune and fellowship around policy development and around legislation and politics and all of those issues that are really structural and governmental. So I believe that the food co-op, everybody goes to the grocery store. And if we can galvanize people around food co-ops, it can truly be a vehicle for social change.
Word.
Thank you, Kenya.
Yeah, I kind of going off of what everybody's been saying. I think like, especially for Black co-ops, we're looking at like what is the underlying assumption for like why we are doing it, right? So like in areas that's been underdeveloped and disinvested, where we're living in food apartheid, right? How can the markets not only be a vehicle to increase access to fresh fruits and vegetables, but how are we using that towards our liberation, right? Like how is it framed? Really, to me, the process of building a co-op is the process of building a movement. You know what I mean? Because we're gathering people together and we're co-creating what is that future that we want to work, live, and play in, and we're building the infrastructure to make it happen, right? And so then, like, how does the co-op then be situated inside the movement as well? As far as like as we're shopping there, and as we're like Kenya mentioned, like it becoming a third space, how are we then using that space to then further organize, like what is this thing that we're really trying to create? Like what is what kind of look like? Like what does it feel like? You know what I mean? Like how are we naming it, right? Even the power of language to transform the context which we're living in, And so to me, I think even in our example, I would say it's been a space for reconciliation, right? Because like our market was birthed out of hyper-segregation, you know, like 98% of African Americans lives on the west side, 94% of white lives on the east side with the Turkish community, Latino community, and African refugees. But in the process of building this market, you know, I mean, people who was afraid to cross the river because of these narratives, you know, cross the river and it helped us organize and this, that, and the other. And so in that process, we learned more of our common humanity, you know. And so I think it's a way to further Black development and Black power, and also I think to reframe what Blackness is. And one other thing I'll say, I'm not sure if it's in another question, is that we've been able to use the market to create Black economy. So like if there's a product that comes out of the west side, like it's designated in March, right? So that like we know how we're spending our dollars. So we have a west side local, a regional local, and then a statewide local. So all these other ways that we can be intentional about how we're moving together and building that shared identity, you know what I mean? That like we deserve more, you know what I mean? We're not gonna accept what we had before, you know what I mean? And how we can leverage our resources and our gifts and talents together towards making that compelling, you know, making it happen.
So,
Question.
oh,
What's
yes.
the name of that book again, please?
Collective
Collective
Courage.
courage.
Courage, the history of Black cooperative thought and practice by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhart. But there's also another, Freedom Farmers, by Dr. Monica White, who is located right here in the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Oh, shit. Yes, ma'am. I wish she could have been here.
Right,
She's keynoting somewhere else. Yes. Send her
And you
love.
know, Darnell, that collective courage text is really a must-read for Black co-op because she really goes in depth on the history and a lot of the hurdles that co-ops historically have had to jump in order to not only get the movement going, but to stay in the movement. So you can learn a lot about what not to do from reading that text.
That's right.
What was her name again?
Jessica Gordon
Okay.
Nemhard, Nemhard.
Okay.
Kenya, I'm going to start off with the next question with you.
Okay.
How do the efforts to develop Black-led food co-ops in cities connect with the movement to restore Black farming and Black ownership of land?
Well, first off, like with Gym City Market, we put an emphasis on buying local. So we have a designation in our store where you can see that we have vendors who are local West Dayton, and then we have local Miami Valley, which is a region, and then we have local to Ohio. And so people can actually support those local vendors. And definitely, you know, we, by being part of the National Black Food Justice Alliance, it gives us an opportunity to even take it a step forward and really cooperate and collaborate with that alliance to, if we do have to ban from outside of Ohio. So that's one way that Black co-ops can connect and help with local agriculture. But we've been making a lot of effort also to connect with local farmers specifically with regards to their grow programs, looking at what items are being predominantly requested, and then ensuring that they can use that to kind of, for lack of better words, to narrate or to dictate what they sow, what kind of crops they create.
Thank you. And I don't know if you're hearing the...
We're sending your love, Kenya.
Yeah.
Got some snaps.
You got some snaps. Some snaps
I
happening.
can't see anybody or hear anybody.
I know.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna turn this around at some. I'll figure it out. All right. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can go. I think there's probably two, like there's scales to look at it. So like one would be, you know, an individual co-op, but then also like how we're building like an infrastructure, like with Detroit and Flint and the other co-ops in the region, right? That like to create more of a base, to create more support for the Black farmers, right? Because I think part of the thing is like how we're determining like what crops, like what do we want to grow, you know what I mean? And being able to support the farmers so they know that we'll buy so much kale, we'll buy so much of this, you know what I mean, so that we can bring it together more. And I think like, especially up north, I think the black community is not aware of like food systems as much, you know, like we kind of take it for granted and we just go and we get our food, right, instead of like unpacking and really like thinking about like how are we getting access to our food, you know, and who's controlling and making the decisions about our access to food, you know what I mean, and so I think it's a way to increase our consciousness, you know, and also the prioritization of land, right? Because like if we're talking about building power and we're talking about building sovereignty, you know what I mean, land is key, you know what I mean, farming is key, you know what I mean, that's why you know, organizing movements, like food is the easiest way to organize a community, you know, and so I think like our market itself can, you know, we're trying to develop, a network of black farmers, you know what I mean, and connecting it up to Cincinnati and this, that, and that. But I really think is how we're connecting the co-ops, you know what I mean, that we can increase our buying power, you know what I mean, and our intentional support. So I think it's an ongoing thing, you know, but I'm excited to see what we can do together.
I'm excited too. I keep hearing like this co-op is a movement. I feel that strongly, just because as more black-led food co-ops are developed, it's a foundation that's created that we have to increase the supply chain. Because I know the black co-ops that I'm working with, they are being very intentional about seeking out black-led entities to fill their needs. So if that's like architects, if that's general managers, if that's farmers, like we're looking for black people in our black co-ops. So just wanted to see like that scale out. So the more black co-ops we have, the more food we're going to need, the more farmers we're going to need, the more land we'll need. So all that will continue to increase as we continue to increase the co-ops. So it's all connected.
Yes.
I kind of want to be bold and add something, because I think it's just important to also say this too, and I'm sure you'll probably get to it too, but just burn it. Anyway, I think it's a way to address the systemic dispossession of land that black farmers have faced in this country, because at a certain point you have to realize, like, you know, we're working towards land and we're working towards getting black farmers their land and keeping their land and all of that. Well, okay, as they grow these products, they also have to send it somewhere. And so these movements have to be intentional about working together and building together and being interconnected and supporting each other, because black farmers need to be supporting black communities. And if the black farmers are supporting black communities, what systems are in place for them to have that economically beneficial to them?
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Moving our food around.
Yeah.
So I know that Kenya's straining to hear, and so I'm going to need to get up and get a little more active. So this is what I'm going to do. One, Kenya, I think you've asked to be able to see people, so let's see if we can get that going for you. And then I'll get up as conversations are happening. All right. So that solves one of the problems that we were having. The second one is, as people are sharing, I know that Kenya's trying to strain to hear you, so I'll get up and try to kind of, the way back in the day with Oprah, run around. And so hopefully she'll be able to hear you.
Do you need a runner? Do you need someone to do that for you?
Hey.
I don't know if you hear her, she's like, you get a card. You get a card. So yeah, we'll have to play with this because this is how she's speaking to us, but when she's not speaking, people will tell you there's going to be a lot, so I could probably use some help there too.
Okay.
So I appreciate that.
What
So
if you
for
had
now-
people come up to the front when they have a question and you keep the mic up at the front?
Oh my gosh, yes.
That's why it's problem, right?
That keeps me.
That's why you want an award.
I gotta tell you, I want to take this to my therapist. I'm like, I'm so codependent. I was gonna run around the room. You know, let people come up here. All right, so that is a great solution. Thank you. But I'm gonna stand up anyway because I'm not really much of a sitter. The next question. What is that? That we came up together with? Right. So, what is the role of shared learning and study within the Black food justice and cooperative economic movement? So,
We all on this panel.
So again, and make sure that, Kenya, were you able to hear that question?
It's a great question, yes.
Muted.
You're on mute, dear.
You said, you asked about the role of research and study?
The role of shared learning. Yeah, within the movement.
Oh, yes, and you want me to answer first?
Sure.
Okay, so my genius prophetic friend of my philosophy. No, well, he's a sociologist just at heart. And he brought popular education to our community engagement early on, and it really helped to infuse passion from our community into the movement and the co-op work that we were doing, because members of the community, lay people, so to speak, could just come and talk about any topic that they're passionate about. And we had sessions on them, like Popular Ed 101 on water, Popular Ed 101 on food justice, on cooperatives, because a lot of people don't know about cooperatives as an entity. You know, it's not even on the register when you apply for some like government statuses. They don't have cooperative as an option. So people are not aware of cooperatives. So it's really critical in terms of shared learning and how we can find platforms and create opportunities for people to get engaged in the work and to find themselves in the work and connect with others.
That's right.
Connecting with others is so, so important in this work. It's really about synergy, and if we can create enough synergy, then the co-op movement becomes catalytic for structural change.
Come on, boy, Hilly.
I learned from the best.
Okay, well, we're gonna hear from the best.
Well, I don't know about the best, but we're co-creating it together, right? And Kenya is a field marshal general, right? So to me, I think this goes to this notion of participation, right? Because we're so often used to being recipients. How do we transform our communities from being recipients to co-creators, right? Or how do we increase our participation in creating our shared future? And so to me, the education is part of the way that we're actually learning how to do that. Like we're building our analysis together. You know what I mean? We're looking at our lived environment. We're developing our praxis. This is where we are. Do we like these experiences? Do we not like these experiences? Or do we want a different type of experience? And then we start trying it out. You know what I mean? We start learning. We start growing from learning from other communities, learning from each other. You know what I mean? Like what is those common experiences, right? Because the key to praxis is if I'm experiencing it, it's one thing. But if like 10 other people are experiencing it, now we got structure, right? And so we can start like unpacking this thing. So to me, I think political education or just popular education in general is like the root of it all, right? Because we can't build a shared future without building our shared analysis, and we can't build our shared analysis without having these conversations and by learning together. So I think it's the key, because we also got to build our shared identity. Like how do we expand our we? You know what I mean? Like where is that boundary where? So to me, I think it's part of how we move and build a container. And I'm gonna go a little bit off subject because it's just kind of what I'm feeling right now. Is not only are we the ones we've been waiting for, I'm starting to realize like we're the only ones holding back ourselves from the vision that we want to have. Like what's stopping us? You know what I mean? And so
Say that again.
and so it's like, how are we really like using our resources and power towards building the future that we want to create? And so it's so to me, I think education is part of the process of learning how to do it. You know what I mean? And exploring what is possible, because I think ultimately, like we have to be the compelling, right? Like we have to be the thing that we're trying to move into, so that others see that it's possible and can join. You know what I mean? Because like if we just keep it in our heads, you know what I mean? Like Bill Hook said, know but verify and praxis, right? And so it's like, so how are we living these things out? But to live it out, we gotta study. You know what I mean? So I think it's all interconnected. But I think the goal, like the talk a couple days ago, about like how we're centering all this work inside of our bodies, because I think like that's the only way that we're going to actually transform the lived environment and create the systemic change that she was talking about. Because structure, I'm nerdy, so I told you sometimes. So like structure is ideology plus resources. So like we have an idea, and then we put our resources towards making it happen. You know what I mean? And so I think like the public education is like what are these ideas that we're trying to manifest, and how are we leveraging our resources, gifts, and talents towards birthing it? You know, and so to me, it's all interconnected.
Absolutely. I don't even know where I'm going after that. You brought up practice a few times, and yesterday I kind of remembered the steps when you repeated them. So it's like from idea to action, and then that reflection part. So reflecting on this shared learning. So we had a co-op peer call last month, and I feel like that was our most on-fire call. So many people had questions just to dig into Omaha's Gem City's co-op. It was talking about lessons learned from being open for 1 year. Like, what could they have done differently? What are they looking to do? And just having that space, being in community with each other, it felt so organic and needed, because it's like so many people are like looking to be in that area, but like, what are y'all learning? So we don't all have to have the same learning curve. We don't have to keep making the same mistakes. So I do feel that shared learning is like essential to us continuing to build that movement, which is why I keep referencing back texts and books that I feel like everyone should have in their library, because we need this like together. Our minds are stronger together. I do feel that this think tank that we have like is just phenomenal. So we are the ones we've been waiting on.
I say. Hey, you know, if we just talk like, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I don't want to stop.
Nope. Nope, I want to hear.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I was doing some reflection work myself a little while ago based upon something that an elder said to me, and an elder who, like the rest of us, have been socialized in a system that wasn't designed for us, right? So taking it back to shared education, shared work, and I believe what our community needs is to understand that we have to make up. I wrote some of it down because I'll go off track in a second. Making up for what schools don't do and haven't done. So our community has been socialized to believe systems and structures designed to benefit whiteness. And therefore, when we go out and about and we're talking to each other and organizing and uplifting each other, we often forget that we're using terms and thinking and rationales that were given to us by a system that wasn't meant to benefit us. And so in a way, we're turning inward on ourselves and not progressing.
Right.
We need a new way of thinking, and we have to be actively in search of that way of thinking. And that stuff shows up in books too. But they're African diasporic books. They're books that talk about blackness and our history and the way and the way we put many before one. That's all throughout our history. It is not a part of American history where we put the individual first and you go around talking about what you've done, knowing you didn't do shit by yourself, but you're talking about it that way. So the importance of language and meaning, context and subtext, what you're saying and the nuances of what you're saying. We talked a little bit about this earlier. So black people need to be doing this work. And I'm not against a sincere white ally helping with the work. But before we let that in, those people in, we need to do our research and make sure they're on track. Because if they're using the wrong words, the wrong language with the wrong nuances, that needs to be checked. And you need to be invited to sit down until you learn how to speak to us in ways that respect who we are, where we're from, and where we need to go. And I'll be talking for the next 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop now.
No, I think it's, I really appreciate that. Like, that's why, well, you know, Karji was in the miseducation of the Negro, right? So, I'm not sure if the system right now can like we have to be our own answers. You know what I mean? And so that's why I keep going back to this reimagining of blackness, right? Because, you know, Ubuntu is embedded inside of us, right? That like I exist because you exist and you exist because I can't be all that I can be until you all you can be, right? And so, like I'm saying the reimagining blackness because our idea of blackness is tied to a white imagination. You know what I mean? And so like, how are we co-creating for ourselves and by ourselves, right? And then walking it out. You know what I mean? Like I'm real big in that. Well, first of all, I think blackness is rooted in love, right? And that love is the royal law. You know what I mean? And so like how are we stepping up to a higher level of moving amongst each other by grounding ourselves in love and practicing out amongst others? So really, talk about like what is black love, right? And black love actually is not discriminatory. You know what I mean? Because like it was the assumption of whiteness that created a separation in humanity. You know what I mean? And so it's like black never separated. Black never said one person was not human. You know what I mean? And so it's like that is not our mess to deal with. You know what I mean? So like how do we move forward and pave the way? You know what I mean? And so but all that comes back to education. All that comes back to analysis and shared learning and a shared understanding, right? And so like how are we defining ourselves for ourselves and the multiple complexity of it, right? And what we need to do to move ourselves forward.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for those questions yesterday in that session. It was about like, how does your co-op define democracy? Like, how do you all define cooperation? You know, so if we don't have that shared definition, we're not learning together, we're not going to come from the same space, and it will be conflict, and like we won't move forward and see the vision that we know we need. So,
something that I've seen us struggle with and want to know how to get past is the intergenerational conversations. A lot of times I feel like in that part where we know what our power is, we don't. I feel like in that time where we don't know what our power, when we are moving and we expect to know what our power is, we kind of expect the person to be over 40. We don't expect for them to be 18, 19, 20, 21, 25, 26, 30, 31. So a lot of times we stop ourselves from moving with our full power because it's not what we expected it to be. So how do we get past that?
And I think we have Kenya maybe for 5 more minutes.
okay, maybe she.
So I'll start with that question for Kenya. Kenya, were you able to hear the question about kind of intergenerational co-op movement, and in a way that is respecting the skills and the talents from all the generations, right? That sometimes it's leaning towards people who are 40 and over, but there's a lot of knowledge that's coming from folks that are much younger. And I'm wondering if you have any insights and thoughts about that question, and then anything that you'd like to say before you leave us.
Yes, I think transgenerational relationships are really critical. Amaha and I are both nation builders on an alliance here in West Dayton called the Dayton Africana Elders Council, and it gives us elders, nation builders in Amaha and I age group, and then there's a younger group of warriors, and then there's even a younger group of Watoto. But the purpose of that structure is that so that you can have a platform for those generations to come together. That's something that we don't see, and I think as we learn and recognize what the Willie Lynch letter did to us in terms of separation and division, then we can create those anti-structures that work against those structures. Because the Bible says that the kingdom hasn't suffered violence, but the violent take it by force. So it's our responsibility to educate ourselves on these methods and structures that were created in order to create divisiveness in our community, and then find ways of working together, especially transgenerationally. That's really critical. One program I had was called the Ecological Team, and I took young people to a senior citizen home where we gardened there and we cleaned up the streets during the week, and then when we harvested, we shared elders. So finding ways and projects that we can bring those groups together and really be the bridge. Most of you all in the room are probably somewhere around nation builder age. So how can we be a bridge between the younger generation and the older generation, coming up with witty ideas? But thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's why I was saying you're the Field Marshal General. They thought I was joking.
Appreciate you. What was the name of the?
Love you.
What's the name? It's Nation Builders. What is it?
Yeah, it's the Dayton Africana Elders Council. So really, we're trying to create a village, right? So we have elders, warriors, well, nation builders, warriors, and watotos. And interestingly enough, I mean, I hadn't gotten the subject, but you mentioned language, right? So to me, I actually think we need to get away from saying community, because when we hear the word community, we have all these assumptions and context that automatically comes to mind. Like, I want to know what a village looks like, what the village feel like, you know what I mean? And like, so we can explore and try, yeah, because language is the key to transformation, right? Like, we create a new language and we create a new way around it, you know? So we're trying to create an African village, Africana village in Dayton. And I think that I appreciate that insight and that question. Like, to me, like, I'm thinking about Sweet Honey in the Rock and Ella's song, right? And it talked about the what are the roles of elders, what are the roles of youth. And I would respectfully disagree that I think the power is with the youth, you know what I mean? And so like how are we pushing the power down, you know what I mean? And like in Dayton, we have a conversation that like, you know, some of our elders kept the baton a little bit too, some of them still have the baton, you know what I mean? And so it's like we've already kind of made a commitment amongst ourselves that like as it gets passed to us, we're not going to hold it, we're going to pass it down, right? So one generation got to take an L for this thing to really get where it needs to be, you know what I mean? And so like I agree, and then I think we all need to learn from each other, you know what I mean? And like how we're using our gifts and talents. You know, like when the elder dies, the library is lost, right? So how are we sitting at the elder's feet to get this information, to get this wisdom, right? To understand the context so we can see and understand like what we are seeing, you know? But how we keep like the power and the movement in the younger generation, you know what I mean? Because like that's more rounded into the whatever's happening right now, you know what I mean? I'm agreeing. I think we gotta keep working at it, but yeah.
I just think that the elders should help light the torch of the younger generation.
That's it.
If we can do that, we'll see some great things.
I agree.
But I think to rebuttal that, I think that you think that the torch is not already lit.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I think that we recognize that some of these issues and problems we've been dealing with for even longer than you. So we're looking at, you know, some of the other generations, like, why are we still here? That's our perspective, and I can imagine that that's a perspective that exists every new generation that comes in. Not understanding.
It's the gap. We got to close in the gap and communicate and keep establishing a relationship. That's what's important, and that's going to be the key. Relationship.
It's the establishment of that shared knowledge.
Sorry, there's also people in the back that you may not see that we're trying to. So first you, and then two in the back.
We'll talk later.
One in the back.
Yes, we'll talk later.
And then would you like to speak as well?
I'll stand and put on my preacher's voice.
Hey!
All right, I want to say to the kings and queens in the room.
Come on.
I'm the newbie on the block, and I've garnered a lot of wisdom and insight. Just a few nuggets and some insights just to throw out there for knowledge. What the little king said was, as an elder, I'm an elder, I don't mind. As an elder, I think what would be helpful for us, the village, that we need to create our own language and our own glossary. Because not only with us communicating, because I'm listening even to some of the words we used here are still the patriotic white supremacy language. So language is powerful. I deal with children. And so I think if we can come up with a glossary, so when we are communicating we're using the language that we understand, and that's more powerful. The other thing is, I came to garner what a co-op is. And with brothers and sisters in the room, and I was perplexed and puzzled because still hearing that word co-op, where did it come from? Where did it originate from? And so that glossary of the language that we use and identifying why we do what we do and how we do it still should come from the language that we create when we're communicating with ourselves and our children. Because it's important that we educate our children, but we also, when we're communicating the idea, that we communicate not only with them, but with ourselves, the language that we understand. Because if we keep using the same language, the barriers that we are feeling, like you said, is coming within ourselves because it's coming out of ourselves because of what we're speaking to ourselves.
That's it.
So we're speaking that language of bondage and still using it as we speak it, so we become. As an elder, I acquiesce. I don't have any problem because I honor the young brothers and sisters in the room because you guys are paving the way from which we have not been through yet. I know the elders said, oh, we're older and we've been through more. No, you all are paving the way that we have not been, but we have to purposely reach out to each other. You guys bring us up and we take you around the corner, but we do it as a collective because you guys are in a path that we have not been in.
Thank you. And thank you for that question, because I think that conversation needed to be had. We, as a panel, I brought you in.
I'm not
Yeah,
Erin, by the way.
you're like Erin Dale wasn't able to.
Shout out Erin.
I'll speak on it before you go to the last question. Just to continue what everyone's saying, just being intentional about respecting everybody's contribution. And I know previously our organization, I see one of our youngest leadership team members that was here, and our leadership team, we got a couple leadership team members in there, okay? So the leadership team of the Alliance is like our de facto board, and I know at one point, maybe there were 18 serving on the board with some other people that were not 18. Yeah? No? Okay. Elders in the room. So it felt like...
And was that shade?
Dr. Maliki King is one of the founding members of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, okay? And big up to you. And I felt like that intergenerational time, though I was not a part of the Alliance, it is definitely reflected on as something we need to keep being intentional about. Making sure that it's accessible and not feeling like it's out of touch so that young people can serve and have that capacity.
There's two questions. It's going to be a little bit of a shift. And we're still on time for Q&A, so unless, if you feel like there's a moment here that you really...
Yeah, I just real quick.
St. Louis.
So, I come from an area, right, where I had to step outside of my city to get eldership from people like Agroecology and others. So, like, also taking account that there are some people who are in this work that don't have elders. I like to call them elders, because we have a lot of elders in our community, just people that are old age with no wisdom. And so, like, you know, as we create spaces like this, you know, for the young people, talk to your elders. Man, take time to talk to someone like Ababa Mali, to talk to Reverend Tevin, you know, and so those times to gain that wisdom, because this work is a long work, and it's and in cities like we in, it's lonesome. And so take that time to learn from true eldership, and make sure, you know, like I had to learn that, like, oh, I'm listening to a fool right now, not really an elder, you know. And I had the whole perspective be different, and so like that's my thing for it. Like young people, take the time to really reach out to eldership and ask those questions. But also be prepared to step into leadership, because when it's your time to step in, man, be building up and be ready.
Thank you.
That's good.
There's two questions.
Okay.
This is a little bit of a shift, but I'm really curious about what you're both going to say and what the group wisdom is going to say in this too, which is what do you believe is the role of nonprofits in the Black food sovereignty movement?
That was it, cut the check. Yes.
Check was the other way.
Okay, non-extractive checks, non-extractive ones, but, I'm a heat there.
Can I complicate that question? I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
I know the question can be answered in a lot of different ways, interpreted. I'm assuming that I left it open on purpose, because there's lots of ways to read that.
That's a lot of.
I want to give Amaha a moment, and then.
No, they go. Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, so I'm trying to synthesize it as much as possible. Because I feel like nonprofits are sort of taking up the space that, we don't know exactly or imagine an alternative as yet. And I know that, especially some of the nonprofits that I'm a part of, BMC being one of them, are starting to have conversations about how to decentralize or how to even collectivize a nonprofit leadership. But, one of my problems with a lot of what was given to policy for, to support Black farmers was that the money go to nonprofits. And, there's a lot of ways that nonprofits operate in a capitalistic way. And so it's even Black-led ones, And so it sees a continuation of that sort of capitalistic approach when, and I say it's complicated because I'm not clear what the alternative is, right? So, there's governments, there's agencies, there's a lot of other things, but they also have been perpetrating a lot of harm. And so it's like when we're thinking about particularly addressing the dispossession of land, the extraction from our communities of colors, and our Black communities in particular, and how to, not only address it, but resource those communities and, make it in thriving villages. I'm gonna start using that now. Who's doing that? You understand what I mean? Who's doing that? If it's not the nonprofit, if it's not the individuals, not the agencies, who is going to be doing that?
All right, so there's a few things happening behind you. First here, then here, then here.
So I would say that it could work because my husband and I co-founded House of Manna, Afrocentric, faith-based, community-based nonprofit, and I'm also, the Food Cooperative is being led by a Black nonprofit sister who is leading the movement for Black co-op. It could also work if you work with a nonprofit like ours that has property and provides space. They're not all capitalistic. I think if you reach out and research and find them and connect in your community, they're there. They are there that are capitalists. They are our neighbors. But I would just say that we are here. We do have property and we do offer it without any attachments. So Freedom Foods will go into our half of my property, which is 4,000 square feet, and I won't charge rent or anything until we get started. So it is possible to build together in this movement. And land is purchased through our nonprofit so that the farm doesn't have to pay taxes.
Need a microphone?
I'm glad to hear that you brought up the food co-op with a nonprofit, because I also have a nonprofit, but our nonprofit is working toward programming, and it works in coordination with the food co-op, but also a production farm. So trying to figure out how all of those elements are gonna work together, I don't know. But that's what I'm working toward, and that's what I want, because what we're doing is starting with children. Because I guess you guys were talking about legacies. So my father used to have a foster care agency, and he always used to tell me, get the children, you get the parents. So that's kind of in my ear right now. is dealing with children, because it seems like who's buying these kids $300 gym shoes? You know, who's buying all of these designer whatever, you know, is going on. So it's these parents. So trying to get them in a different mindset, and I think you guys were kind of touched on that, you know, that capitalistic, you know, kind of mindset, and just kind of paring it back. And one of the programming aspects that I found, this leather maker, this guy came out of prison. When he was in prison, he learned how to work with leather. He's teaching these young people how to make their own gym shoes. So, you know, thinking about that term and getting your own stuff, you know, that's kind of the programming portion that we're trying to get. So working along with the food co-op, that's I would love to hear, you know, more about that.
Thank you, Karen. We have Carlos, and then I think there were a couple of people who want to speak in the back.
So I feel like it depends on the policy structure of where you are. So I come from a city where there's over 250 nonprofits, and we don't need another one. The biggest nonprofit owns most of the land across the state, not even just the city. So it's like, do we really want to participate in this? And the reason why our neighborhoods are struggling is because there's no tax base for them, which nonprofits exist and don't pay taxes. So do we want another nonprofit, or do we want to build our communities? Putting another nonprofit there is not building equity in my community. When we really get into building equity, it depends on back to location. What is your location? Does a nonprofit work for you? It may, depending on the tax benefits you can get off. Talk to the IRS. And see, you know, look at the business structure of which you want to operate. Because the other thing is that you can move between, ma'am, you can open up a social enterprise. Your nonprofit can own your business, so that way you don't have to, but then you couldn't pay yourself from your business. You can only pay yourself from a nonprofit. So understanding the benefits and everything that come from with your structure and with your business based off of your neighborhood is important. To just dive into a nonprofit because it sounds good and it's not it. Look at, also in a cooperative element of it, is look at what the other people around your neighborhood are doing. So while we have, you know, Sister Free who owns her building, in that community alone there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other nonprofits who own some of the biggest parcels in the community. And she's the only one who's, you know, respectively doing, you know,
The right thing.
so again, do we need another nonprofit or do we need an investment? So, and then I think the other thing is that nonprofits aren't sustainable. Grant money runs out, and there's not really a way to invest grant money. So we have to figure out, outside of creating revenue streams, I need an investment, which is crowdfunding, there's Kiva loans, there's different financing options on different ways to invest our money and use the grant money to back that.
Thank you. Do you need the?
No, I don't need that. Just real quick. So I have a nonprofit and a for-profit, Little Africa Food Collaborative, which is the nonprofit, and Little Africa Food Cooperative, which is of course the cooperative. For COVID, we were able to get funds and feed people, as well as with our nonprofit, as well as hire, I hate to say ex-felons, but returning citizens. We're able to hire them to deliver food to the sick, the elderly, and shut-in people who can get outside. So it's about how you structure it and what you do.
How you take it through.
Cleveland Clinic is a non-profit, and it's a whole city in Cleveland. It is a non-profit and we're thriving. So it's about what you do with your non-profit. It's about knowing the law, knowing how to get
a big chunk of the city.
Finesse, so that we can all eat and so we can all make a way. So it can be done, but you just gotta know how to do it and to make sure that everybody eats. So yeah, we got some land and now the co-op got some land, and you know what I'm saying? It's a way to do it. You just know how to know how.
Thank you, Keelan. Thank you, Keelan. Brett?
Yes, and I was gonna say, that's excellent, that's what I was gonna offer. because I also I'm a pastor, I have a nonprofit, and I'm part of the government. I'm a council person in the city, and I'm a part of the state of Missouri, state of Missouri Economic Development Analyst Policy Writing Team.
Okay.
So,
Huddle with it.
that's how you do it, and this young sister just gave a nugget. You can have a nonprofit because it has its place, but if you have your LLC, your LLC is your sustainability for your nonprofit. For your nonprofit, you put all of your programs, your co-op and everything up under that. Use your LLC to create the jobs and the financial stream, and the government can't touch you. You only pay a minimum amount of taxes, and that's how you get it done.
So, can I ask you a question? So, as far as, and this is a part of the conversation about nonprofits and for-profits, as far as your government official, how now do we step into that advocacy and policy piece under nonprofit status? Because we can't do that under C3 status and stuff.
So you can't do it under C3, but you can do it under the 504.
But that gets tricky having a C3, C4, and...
No, it doesn't.
No?
No, it doesn't.
I'm
Because
just-
what you have two entities that's interconnected. One is doing the purpose of the 504 and advocacy work, and that advocacy work that you went up under, you slide it up under, and it's legal, up under your nonprofit, and you get it done.
Gotcha.
It's like a bid.
It's a bit.
It's really about knowing how to use that system.
That's a lot of communication.
It's like a bid, so it's like having a nonprofit, layering the for-profit, and it works because if you want to be a village, you really need to build capacity, and each of those are building capacity. It's not like you're tricking the system, it's just everything has a place. And the structures, the business structures, one will have things where you're able to get multi-layer grants, one will have things where you have to pay out. So just, it's a bid model.
You have to know. You gotta do your work.
Thank you so much. I want to give Maha a chance, and then there's three others, and then there is a final question I was hoping to be able to approach to. So we have a lot going on.
I was gonna say,
Carlos.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
you know, I'm thankful for some of the lawyers that are in the room, because like one of our biggest breakthroughs that we had was we sat around and we said, this is what we want to create, and then we had community lawyers in the room. Okay, so if this is what you want to create, this is going to happen. You know what I mean? So they helped us build a structure. You know what I mean? So like, so you know, we have a. So Co-op Dayton is our nonprofit incubator. You know what I mean? Then we have the for-profit as the Gypsy Bar. In Ohio, you can't have a co-op that's a nonprofit, right? So, so I guess I bring that up just to say that like this was a super technical conversation, and some of it probably over my pay grade. But just knowing that like we have the competency in the room, you know what I mean, to help put these pieces together. So I appreciate that. You know.
Thank you. They were, oh boy, their hands were going on, but I did see a couple in the back before, and then we'll get here, and then hopefully the last question, because I think that'll be interesting too.
It is interesting. It is an interesting question.
So I'm a little reluctant to share this, but you know, if so hopefully I hear it with grace. But I know banks are deeply capitalist structures. They're problematic for any number of reasons. But there are a lot of there are black banks. They've recently gotten significant injections of capital from the federal government under COVID because of mass dollars. Some of them don't know what to do with that money. They're literally like eligible.
Can we have their numbers? Can we have their phone numbers?
This is my point. Like, there's a National Trade Association that's been around since like the 1920s called the National Bankers Association. You know, like they're getting like hundreds of millions of dollars. They can turn into billions of dollars, but they don't have a national deployment strategy. And it's because y'all, like that community and this community, I feel like aren't in conversation.
Right.
And so I think that's something you should definitely explore as a...
You the plug.
you know, as the national, like, justice.
You the plug.
Yeah, I chat y'all, but, you know, it's like, I wanna put y'all in the same room and see what can come out of it.
Right, that'd be dope. Yeah, get that.
No, we need
What
you
you
in the
mean
room.
you reluctant
We need you in
to
the
share
room.
that?
You're reluctant, Chris, man.
This is my first time here, I don't know what's
There is no space for fear or reluctance. Let's just die.
I know I saw your hand back there, so I want to make sure I get you, and then here, then the last.
Waiting for it.
So I have a history of building capacity with nonprofits across the state of Michigan. And, you know, I come and see how a lot of folks are building and how they're trying to build. And it's wonderful that folks are using nonprofits as a vehicle and a mechanism to an end. And I think to recognize that as a tool to an end is really important.
Yes.
Nonprofits and the history of it has been used as a tool to suppress social movements. And,
Yes.
you need to get a permit to do a vote protest. Like, this is all toward a certain end. One of the things that I am loving that I'm hearing is what does sustainable structures look like? We got our own food, water, shelter, and energy. And then if we got a village, if we get enough money from these black banks to buy a town and call it a village and create our own structures and laws, so it's ours. That's what I'm doing. So everybody's working toward those things I found.
Thank you.
That's right.
Start early.
Hey y'all, I'm Alexis, also with the Alliance, also one of those pesky young people who always got questions. And I have a few years of experience with nonprofits, and I was actually gonna basically echo what the brother in the back said, is that I think along with the context and the reality that nonprofits are being used to quell our most radical aspects of the movement right now, they're also being used to separate us by class. Because there are some people, there are many black people, most black people will never have access to creating or starting or even being employed by a nonprofit. And so my question is, how do we make sure we're not focusing so much of like how we can be comfortable within what we're building, but how do we like center what's next? How do we get to the outside of the system? How do we get to outside of the Ford Foundation, whatever grants that we're getting that are funding us right now, that can move us closer to the revolution that we desperately need?
That's a good question.